good evening, this is Hound Dog Steve wishing you a very pleasant evening, and this video is a bit of an addendum to the previous video about the debt bubble, the $188 trillion, and this is an interview with a chap called Grant Williams, and he is the publisher of the economic blog Things That Make You Go and it is a very interesting interview about the fact that there is going to be a reset, and it will either be an inflationary reset or a deflationary reset, but one way or another it is going to happen. So we'll just flip right over to this letter, and we'll come back and I'll do a quick wrap up. Okie dokie, here we go. From Zero Hedge, Grant Williams, a reset of the system is inevitable. And this is authored by Adam Taggart, and this was an interview. While at the New Orleans Investment Conference this past weekend, Chris and I had the great pleasure of sitting down with Grant Williams, publisher of the economic blog Things That Make You Go and principal of Real Vision TV. There will be no smooth transition back to sustained economic growth, he warns. Instead, the distortion of today's excessive asset prices will require a systemic reset to fix, either by a deflationary event that destroys the malinvestment or by an inflationary event that destroys the currency. Either way, a shock to the system awaits us. When the 2008 crisis hit, we were at the brink. Guys like Jamie Dimon will tell you that we were this close to the banking system not functioning, people being unable to get cash out of the ATMs. If you live in Cyprus, if you live in Greece, you've already seen this movie play out in real time over the last few years. You had your savings confiscated by the government or a bail-in. It may not happen here in the US until the very end, but to say it couldn't happen here is clearly wrong. There's nothing that says the United States is exempt from the laws of finance and thousands of years of historical precedent. Even though it happens to be in the ascendancy globally at the moment, those things change. Ask Portugal, who used to be the holders of the world's reserve currency centuries ago. Today, they're just one part of the euro. These things ebb and flow, they rise and fall. A true systemic crisis is what we saw in 1929 to 1933. It is to a large extent what we saw in 1971 when Nixon closed the gold window, although it didn't have the same outcome and it didn't look the same. But we had the punishing massive period of inflation afterwards, so it was a systemic crisis. 2008 was a systemic crisis too. In 1929 and 1971, the answer was dealt with through the gold standard and through the pressure valve of the gold price. In 2008, they tried a different route. They tried printing money and throwing as much fake money at the whole thing as they possibly could. The worst thing that I think happened was it did stop it. It was enough to arrest the slide. Did it fix it? No, and that's the problem. Nixon's move in '71 fixed the system for a while. It was a massive one-off reset that allowed the world to rebuild from a much more solid base. The same thing in 1929. We went through tremendous unemployment and the problems that came with the Great Depression, but that gave markets a clearing price. It allowed society to reset. That's what we didn't get in 2008. We had an investment bank go down. We had a lot of people lose their homes, but in many cases they were homes that they simply couldn't afford anyway. So being told that you've lost your third condo that you bought with leverage, that's not a Great Depression type event. That's the financial gods coming back and saying, this is not how it's supposed to work. If you're a dancer in Florida and you own 13 condos all with leverage, don't start crying when it doesn't work out. So what's likely to happen is another reset of the system. They're fighting tooth and nail against it, and that's their job. Frankly, if you say to them, what are you trying to do? They're trying to avoid these outcomes, which is fine. But these outcomes, unfortunately, are only truly avoided by not letting them build up in the first place. That's the problem. Because man has an unquenchable thirst for leverage, once the system resets and leverage is cheap again and we're no longer over-indebted, we will do the same thing again. Because that's how society has become conditioned to grow, through the use of credit. Credit is a fantastic thing in the right circumstances, but it always ends up being the thing that brings these cycles to an end, and we're there again, unfortunately. Okay, so I don't really want to dwell too much on the debt situation, but it is the huge elephant in the room that nobody is talking about, the banks seriously have absolutely no idea what to do about this, and at some point this is all going to have to be reconciled. Nobody knows when, nobody knows exactly how. These things tend to work themselves out. But the sad thing is, as the article points out, we probably haven't learned our lesson, even now. And the only thing that might slow us down, and if we're using up 230% of the world's output, sooner or later, at some point, the Earth is just going to give up in a gasp, and it just will not be able to put out those kind of resources anymore, because it's just not sustainable. And I've heard this mentioned many, many times. We are way beyond the replacement ability of this planet. Cutting down trees, clear cutting, slash and burn techniques, the types of farming we're getting into. It takes thousands and thousands of years to build up just 2 or 3 inches of topsoil, which is the growing element of the earth. The rest is rock, sand and gravel. So at some point the earth is going to give a gasp, and I think that will be the final limiting factor. And I hope to goodness that it doesn't come to that, because it will be a sorry state when you can't even grow. You talk about eating bugs, that's what we'll be doing, folks. We'll be digging up worms and grubs and all kinds of things to get protein. And forget the luxury of being a vegetarian. You'll be eating anything that you can. So hope and pray that humanity does in fact learn its lesson before it's irretrievable. And the only way to do that is by spreading this information, by talking about this stuff. I know it may seem tedious at times, but that's the only way, is to spread this information. When enough of us refuse to consent to go along with this nonsense, when we refuse to elect politicians who are willfully blind to the situation. It is insane. Really, when you look around and you see all of these people with university degrees and these high flyers and all this kind of stuff, why is it that a grade 10 barber has to get behind a camera and tell this story, has to research out information and tell this story, so at least some of you can hear it? Because it sure isn't coming from our leaders. And that, my friends, my fine feathered friends, is an absolute disgrace. And it's only going on because we condone it. We consent to it because we don't say anything about it. So if you've enjoyed this video, please like, comment and subscribe below. And in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a very pleasant evening, and we will talk very, very shortly. See you now. Bye.